Hello everyone, Neil Patel here. Thank you for downloading the latest episode of the Indian Startup Show. First of all, some exciting news from the guys at MetLife Foundation. They are actually running the MetLife Inclusion Plus competition. It's an innovation competition which offers a unique opportunity to startups in the financial inclusion, financial technology space. Amazing stuff. So the idea of Inclusion Plus is to identify, recognise and support promising social entrepreneurs and enterprises which can potentially make a positive impact on financial inclusion. So the competition will be targeting entrepreneurs who are leading innovation in the financial services industry, aimed at low to moderate income households. The applicants will compete for, wait for it, a share of $150,000 in awards. That's absolutely amazing. So competitors will submit a product, service, program, or innovation solution to improve financial health and well-being for low and moderate income people in India. So the innovation should demonstrate that it will improve people's access to and or adoption and the usage of financial products and services. So that's really amazing. So deadline for entries is 23rd of November 2016. So for further details, kindly visit http://india.inclusionplus or one word.com. So that's india.inclusionplus.com. I've added it to the show notes as well. Anyway, on with the show. So today I speak to Ashwin Damera. He's the co-founder and member of the Academic Board at EMERITUS, an edtech startup. They have developed an executive education model based on the leadership and management training needs of mid-management employees. So they work with top-tier business schools and bring their programs to markets like India, Middle East, and Singapore. So in this podcast, we talk about what inspired him to do this, life as a startup founder, the online education market in India. We also talk about his previous startup, Travelguru. You may have heard of it. It's a company that was later acquired by Travelocity in 2009. And his amazing 2 years spent at Harvard University and much, much more. So please enjoy the show. Thank you. Hello, Ashwin.
Hey, Neil. Good afternoon.
Thanks for coming on the show today. Please tell the listeners a brief overview of what you're building, please.
All right. So at ERITUS and EMERITUS, what we're trying to do is to make Ivy League business education accessible to the world. Mm-hmm. What that basically means is that we work with top-tier business schools, people like Wharton, MIT, Columbia, and we bring their programs to markets like India, the Middle East, and Singapore. And so it used to be that people had to go to the US or the UK to get a high-quality education. What we're trying to do is to bring that education to students in these markets. And that's really what ERITUS and EMERITUS is all about.
Excellent. I mean, what inspired you to do this?
Well, I started my entrepreneurship journey in 2005 with a company called Travelguru. Mm-hmm. And before that, I did my MBA at Harvard Business School. And my co-founder, Chaitanya, is an INSEAD alumnus. So we were, I guess, beneficiaries of the first model of packing our bags and getting to the US or Europe. But we realized, and in the company that I built, Travelguru, we scaled, we had about 350 people. I quickly realized that very few of them could actually get that opportunity. And yet it was a transformational opportunity for me. Mm-hmm. So when we kind of sold and I was thinking about what I want to do next, the idea came to me that, why not make this kind of education accessible to more people. It was also a business where I felt that, beyond how well the business did, there was an impact in terms of touching people's lives. I think education in that sense is, maybe education, healthcare has that, impact. And so it seemed to be the right thing to do. And, it would be a nice way for us to kind of give back something that we had received.
Excellent. And how's it going so far? I mean, can you share some stats? How many signups have you had? How many people are using the course? How many people are using the website at the moment?
Oh, absolutely. So with EMERITUS, actually, we do online courses. We have 3 founding schools, MIT, Columbia, and Tuck. Mm-hmm. We've had more than 4,000 students so far. We are not MOOCs, as in we are not free courses. Our typical certificate course is about $750. Our 1-year diploma is about $4,000. So we have 4,000 students as we speak. We obviously hope to grow that to about 10,000 by the end of this year, mm-hmm. And then many times beyond that. What we're actually very proud of it with our courses and our students is our completion rates are at about 80 to 85%. Mm-hmm. And there's always a question about online education and does it have impact and do people really learn? And I think beyond just the number of enrollments, the high completion rates and the better learning outcomes is something we are very proud of.
Mm-hmm. So can anyone do this? Or, who are you specifically targeting?
The certificate courses is open enrollment. So, if you kind of are interested in the topic, you could sign up. The diplomas, you do have a minimum entry criteria. So you have to be a working professional with a minimum of 3 years working experience. And there's a, admission criteria, the 2 essays, we check references and so on and so forth. But the idea is not to be as selective as, a top Ivy League business school might be, right? Because the whole idea of the business is access. At the same time, we want to make sure that the peer-to-peer learning, which is a signature part of the 1-year diploma, that should not be compromised by not having a high-quality student pool, right? So we want to be accessible. At the same time, we want to be somewhat selective, or at least have some filtering process.
And how big is the market, would you say? Must be pretty big.
Well, if you look at just India, the higher education market, we have 30 million students in some form of higher education, whether that's undergrad or grad. And that represents a 22% gross enrollment ratio. So what that means is only 22% of students who finish high school are going into college, and that number is 30 million. If you look at the UK, for example, the gross enrollment is about 60%. United States, it's 80%. Maybe a better comparison for us would be China, but China has a 35% gross enrollment. And so if India were to go from 22.5 to 30 million, 22.5% to 30% gross enrollment, that's by the way, the government's 5-year plan. We have to create 15 million more seats in higher education. And there's no way the brick and mortar university system with all the red tape and the bureaucracy can ever do that. Forget 5 years, maybe in the next 50 years. And so it's my belief, and that's the opportunity that we are looking at, is that online and hybrid education models is the only way in which we can fill that, the talent gap. And so that's really it's a very large opportunity, and that's what we're going after.
So there must be like a lot of competition as well. I mean, how do you deal with competition?
So, education is a large enough space, and you can define competition so broadly, or you can define it very narrowly. Right? In a sense, somebody could go to a brick and mortar university, and you could say that is competition. And then you could also be narrow and say, listen, we're not offering kind of Indian content. Our content comes from MIT or Columbia or Dartmouth, and these are top tier, top 10 ranked business schools. So you can define that is kind of the consideration set for competition. But my answer to competition, Neil, is the reason we started this was for access. If there are more credible players offering high quality education at a low enough price point that it makes it accessible, then that's great. And there's enough room for everybody. That 15 million number I told you, no one school, no one institution can reach those many people, right? So there's enough room for many people. So what I would like to see, though, is quality in the competition, right? Not people who are kind of printing degrees and making money off it. Because, by the way, there is a market for that. But I think where I would like to see competition is more the high quality learning outcome driven players.
So this time next year, I mean, what would you hope to achieve?
In terms of our courses, we have about 15 certificate courses. We have about 3 diplomas. We would love to double those. We will perhaps add a couple of other partner schools beyond the 3 that we already have. In terms of enrollments, going from 4,000 to about 20,000 in our certificate courses. So these are not, so basically doubling courses, doubling enrollments is our goal. And, we think that kind of a measured growth approach makes sense for us, because what we're trying to deliver here is quality, and scale, not just scale.
Excellent. So how big do you want to actually go with this then?
Well, that's a great question. So our 5-year plan is to get to about 200,000 students. And that's not a very large number if you think about it, and the comparables to that, there are people in India, for example, Sikkim Manipal University, that already has more than 200,000 students, paying students. But if you look at these massive open online courses like Coursera, edX, they actually, Coursera has about 15 million students. Of course, then they're free courses, so not everybody is paying. Our goal in the next 5 years is to get to 200,000, paying students.
Excellent. Let's talk about you then. What's your background? Are you a tech person or non-tech person?
I'm an accountant. I worked in Citigroup for 5 years and then decided that I needed to kind of change the career path. I went to Harvard, did my MBA, and then came right back and started an online travel company called Travelguru. We were acquired by Travelocity in 2009. My background, I would say, is a mix of operations as well as finance. But I think relevant to what we're doing at Emeritus is a strong understanding of how business schools operate. Having gone through their process myself, and also a strong understanding of the B2B and B2C markets in India. My co-founder Chaitanya is more of a techie, so he went to BITS Pilani and worked at Sun Microsystems, etc. So I think he brings the technology piece to Emeritus.
You mentioned Harvard before. What's Harvard really like then?
Well, those were the best 2 years of my life, I guess, because it's rare to have 2 years where you're kind of learning something every day, and it's not learning just from the faculty. It's learning from many of your own classmates. I mean, when I got in the very first week, I met people who had done things that I was hoping to do in the next 5 years. For example, there was I'm sure you've heard of the Rocket Internet, but Alexander Sambo, one of the founders, was a client. And when he came to HBS, and so in 2003, had already built and sold a company to eBay for $75 million. And so there's a lot of diversity in the class, and you learn a lot from that. And so I would say that it was really a pivotal moment in my life. And I think one of the other things that happened while I was at Harvard is in the summer internship. One thing that people used to say is you could always go into banking or consulting. So try and do something a little more courageous in the summer. And I actually got to work in the summer. I interned for the CEO of JetBlue, which was a startup airline. The dean of Harvard Business School was on their board. And they don't recruit on school, but the dean introduced me. And to me, that was a pivotal moment, because till that point, I think I was thinking Harvard Business School, go to McKinsey, work 5 years, come back to India, do something, right? Standard path. And then the experience of working for the CEO at JetBlue and being kind of in the boardroom meetings, discussions with, Airbus and buying planes and pilots and stuff really kind of ignited that entrepreneurial fire in me. And I said, wow, I want to be this person. And that's why when I finished, so I wrote the business plan for Travelguru while at business school, and became runners-up in the business plan contest at Harvard. There were a couple of people who were willing to fund me. A couple of my classmates wrote me my first check, and it was really like, wow. And I had an offer, by the way, from McKinsey to work in the New York office. And I was like, okay, now these are two very different paths. But I think that experience at Harvard gave me the conviction and the courage. And then the internship with Dave Barger at JetBlue said, wow, this is the guy I want to be. This is the path, and this is the time I have to take that plunge. So I would say 2 great years, and really made me change direction. And, I look back and I say, wow, that really had a huge impact on my life.
Let's quickly talk about Travelguru. What was the early days like?
Well, it was the early days of the internet. The early days, it's interesting that you asked that question, because in 2005, when we kind of started, there was Make My Trip and there was us. So we were 2 players, but very quickly, and you see this in every single space, there were 3-4 other people, well-funded, all going for the same customers. It's all about cashbacks and discounts. And so I think at a certain point, what happened was competitive advantage became how much capital you could raise. And by the way, that's happening a lot, maybe a little less in the last 6 months, but happened a lot over the last 2-3 years. And so we had to pivot a little bit from being a full service online travel aggregator to being specialized in hotels. And I think that was a very wise move we did. We made an acquisition. If you know the space, hotels offer a higher margin. And we were actually funded by Sequoia and Battery Ventures, which I think was great. They brought in a lot of connections and inputs into the business. And eventually, actually, in 2009, we exited because for a couple of reasons. One, Travelocity was a very large global player, and they were looking to widen and enter the Indian market. And we felt that consolidation was going to happen, and that was the right time.
What was it like being a startup founder at Travelguru?
So unlike in Emeritus, where I have a co-founder, I kind of was alone at Travelguru. And I would say it's a lonely experience, but it's a great experience, right? It's the best way in which you can learn about business. It's always easier the second time. The first time is kind of literally, it's like a baptism by fire, right? But you're also 20. I was 27, I think, then, and I figured I kind of thought I knew everything, or I could figure everything out. And I think that enthusiasm is important. And again, so I would say, it was fun. Was that the right decision to go down that path? Absolutely. It was also challenging, I would say. So the thing with startups is they have their ups and their downs. So, for example, 2008, after Lehman Brothers collapsed after the attack on the Taj and the Oberoi hotels in Mumbai, and our entire business was hotels. So there was a tough moment, but then you also realize, how strong the team is, and how much you can dig in and build stuff, right? So I really would say that's a great experience to have. It's a good experience to have early in your career because it sets you up nicely for what you do later.
Excellent. I mean, you talk about leadership and management. Can anyone be a good leader or a manager?
So that's like, can you teach this stuff and can you not? I think anyone can if they. I think the biggest thing about just leadership or management is being self-aware, right? Nobody is. So the greatest example. One of my lucky moments at Emeritus is to work with Marshall Goldsmith. And Marshall Goldsmith is this leadership coach guru. And he coaches people, for example, like the CEO of Ford, the ex-CEO of Ford, Alan Mulally. He's coached the CEO of Goldman Sachs. And, you look at these people and they're supremely successful. But why do they then need a coach? And that's because they know that however successful they might be, they still have blind spots. And by the way, they can be even more successful. They can be even better leaders. And so I think the important thing about, can you teach leadership? Yes, you can teach it to somebody who wants to be taught. And if you don't want to be taught and you think that, you're God's gift to lead, mankind in terms of being a great leader and you think you know everything, then you just can't teach that person.
Who would you say are the great leaders, in your opinion?
I always look at the Infosys founders as being people who I respect. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, because they did not inherit a business that they then built. So I don't want to put down people who built family businesses. But when you start up on your own, I know what it is. When I started up, my family actively dissuaded me, saying, we don't come from a business family, right? So we don't have those connections or that mindset. But not only that, I think they built a company with integrity. And it's not just kind of what you build, it's how you build that is important. And so I would say that's a bunch of people that I would, really, really admire.
Last few questions. What should first-time founders be focusing on?
So I would say two things. I'm assuming that they already know what space they're in, what the product is, right? And so the thing that I would say is team, pretty obvious. And it's not just the co-founding team, it's also people who you're getting on to kind of be the senior management team. Many times you hire people who are available. It's very rare that co-founders or founders are hiring people who are better than them. And I think if you can hire a team that's actually better than you, you'll be all set. The second thing is funding, because at the end of the day, you can build a business, grow it organically. It'll only get you so far. But if you raise capital at the right time, it can really accelerate. But the question with funding is not just how much capital you raise, but how do you time it, right? How do you ensure that you raise it, after you've kind of taken a few risks off the table, not too early, which makes it very dilutive, and at the same time not too late, because then you've missed the opportunity of growth.
And what would you say is the main trait entrepreneurs should have?
never give up. So, this is the classic discussion of whether entrepreneurs are risk takers or they manage risk. I think entrepreneurs are risk takers. If you kind of, think about getting into a business and say that, I'll manage the risk and I'll only do it if somebody commits to fund $2 million. I'll only do it after I have a viable product and da-da-da-da. I mean, all that's great, but I think, the true entrepreneurs are people, who get passionate about an idea and then, go after that. And of course, they're smart enough to make pivots and, figure it out. Mm-hmm. But they're not looking to go after something which is, 50% success rate assured. So, it's just the ability to look risk in the eye and say, yeah, come on, I can take you on. I think that's the difference between, many people who I think could have been good entrepreneurs, but never even took the plunge because they were just waiting for that perfect opportunity. There's no such thing.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I mean, could you recommend any books or blogs to our listeners?
On entrepreneurship, there's actually an awesome book. It was written by a Harvard professor called Noel Wasserman. Mm-hmm. It's called, I'm trying to think, I think it's called Founders' Dilemmas.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of that. So the whole idea is, for example, if you have two founders, should you split equity 50-50? Mm-hmm. And most people will, but is that the right way to do it? Mm-hmm. And how should you think about, getting an advisor? How should you think about, if after a year, one of the founders decides to leave, what do you do, etc. I think that's a great book because when people start, they're very focused on product or funding, and they sometimes forget that if you don't get the right co-founding team together with the right incentives, and if you don't kind of discuss these hard issues before they happen, that can then lead to a startup blowing up just because of founder issues, right? So I would actually suggest that book, Founders' Dilemmas by Noel Wasserman.
Excellent. Actually, one last question. What would you say is the hardest part about building this business?
The hardest part. The first thing I would say is that, I believe in what Steve Jobs said, which is only the paranoid people survive. Well, it's hard to be paranoid 24/7. It has an impact on your health, your family. You just don't sleep as well as, if you were not paranoid. But I think that's an essential ingredient to being a successful entrepreneur. So being paranoid is important, but that's hard dealing with. Mm-hmm. It's sometimes, if you're a paranoid person in your team and you don't see other people having the same level of paranoia, it can be somewhat frustrating. It might sound abstract the way I'm saying that, but an example of this would be, let's say in my earlier startup, Travelguru, I would be on the website figuring out, links that are broken or, maybe the content for a hotel wasn't perfect. I'm checking bookings and, you're just literally looking at what's happening and you're really detail oriented. That's a hard life to live. You can do it for 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. But if you had 5 years, I think that's the hard thing of a startup. If you don't, and so the one thing I would say is that if you love what you do, that is easy to be paranoid and enjoy it, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're doing something just for the sake of making money and you're really kind of looking for the outcome but not enjoying the journey, then actually being paranoid and building a startup just won't work.
Last question then. If someone wants more information on you and what you do, what must they do?
Well, they could just follow me on LinkedIn. That'll be the easiest way to get information on what I do. I post a lot. I share a lot. That would be the easiest way to figure out what I'm up to.
Excellent. Ashwin, thank you for coming on the Indian Startup Show today. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Neil. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Brilliant. Have a nice weekend. So thanks for Ashwin to coming on the show today. If you want more information, please go to emeritus.org. Thanks for listening and subscribing. Since launching, we've had 130,000 listeners in total, so thank you very much. If you liked the show, please leave a comment in iTunes. Thank you for supporting the podcast. I shall be back next week. If you have any feedback on the show or want to come on, please send me an email, hello@neilvotel.co, or tweet at Indian Startup SH, or please go to facebook.com/Indian Startup Show. I'd love to connect. Thank you and goodbye.